Welcome to the Murphy, Sam, and Jodi After the Show podcast.
From the show today in 3 Things to Know Today, one of those segments, the third story. You guys remember it?
Wow.
Which hour?
Yeah, this is like a crossword puzzle.
Well, it's something that I thought was just lovely, and I wanted to add it, but I wanted to go a little deeper into it. And it's that the Matthew Perry Foundation, along with the Massachusetts General Hospital, which is in Boston, they created an addiction medicine training fellowship in his name, which is beautiful. I mean, this is something other than just like fundraising. Mm-hmm. This is different. And so there's a doctor there. She's a medical resident in internal medicine. Her name is Dr. Sarah Kler, K-L-E-R is how that's spelled. She's the first one candidate to have been selected for the position, the fellowship. So she's the one that's going to be doing that. She's the first one. Mm-hmm. I don't know how long it lasts. I guess a year or 2 years that she studies addiction medicine. And I just thought, wow, that's so cool, because how many times have we had these conversations about addiction and how it continually needs to be studied? We're talking about something that when I was a child was hush hush.
Yeah.
Like, there were people in my family, adults in my family when I was a child, who were definitely addicted to chemicals and substances, and it was hush hushed. Like, we didn't talk about it. She's coming.
Well, it's a different generation.
It is. I mean, thank goodness.
That's the only thing that I don't care for about that generation, and I respect them, but I don't care for that, is secrets. They're the worst things. They're poison. They usually blow up somewhere, and, thanks to a combination of either someone passing away or 23andMe or something else, you wind up with, secrets that, get exposed that could have otherwise just been talked about,
We know as a kid, you're either very in tune to the adults around you, or you just accept what they say, and you're enjoying being a kid, hopefully. I enjoyed being a kid, but I was definitely in tune to the adults around me and their energy, and I soaked it up like a sponge.
Yeah.
And, I always knew that this person I thought she was funny. I thought she was always just funny. But the way my mom and dad would talk about her when she was not there, this is not funny.
Yeah.
It's not normal, and they don't like it.
When you're a kid, though, it's like anything else that, you're taught. It's going to have to be age appropriate, because you don't really have comprehension of certain things until you get older. But before we go back to that, so I'll go back to the beginning of the fellowship. Help me understand what that is.
Well, this specific fellowship is going to let the doctor concentrate on addiction treatment and addiction care, so that when she's done with the internship as a resident, she becomes a doctor. That's going to be
her specialty.
So she's not a doctor yet.
No.
This is her resident. This is the grant.
This is the grant
she's
to help her
study
all that stuff. And then when she becomes a doctor and gets her license, that's what she's going to focus on, addiction treatment and recovery.
What a great use of donation money.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Yeah. Them creating this from the Matthew Perry Foundation, I think we're going to hear more about that foundation and what they're doing.
Yeah.
But think about his life. This is what a way to honor him. Because think about how many times you guys read the book. I read the book too. So many of us read the Matthew Perry book. How many times did he try to get help, medical help, and he, fail? He didn't fail, but he struggled there.
Yeah.
Or he really wanted medical help, and that's where he always ended up, in a doctor's office, in the hospital. And there were people who could not understand what he was dealing with.
Well, and then the other part, which I don't know that the study that this fellowship covers is doing that, but it would be a place that something should go, is the people around Matthew Perry. Remember, as they released everything, were kind of supporting his habit at that point. What was it? Ketamine? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
And so it's
I think
like
there were other drugs in his system too.
Right. But that was the one that actually I think got him right. Mm-hmm. But, it was his assistant. It's like, what is the psychology behind not understanding that? Is it the pressures of the fact it's Matthew Perry with the money? But if it's a friend of yours,
that's your
wouldn't
job.
You be? What I'm saying is that it's like its own Al-Anon kind of program. You know what I mean?
How many
like
times?
Denial. You're supporting. What's that called when you? I can't think of the term.
Enabling.
You're enabling behavior. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not saying that he wasn't in the wrong. This person, I think, has been charged.
Yeah, they had a couple of doctors
in his
too.
murder or a wrongful death. But imagine that it's your livelihood to take care of this person. You're a personal assistant, and you make a really good living being this person's personal assistant, and they ask you for something, once a week, and it's part of the job. They also ask you to pick up fast food, or pick up dinner, or pick up the dry cleaning, and also get me this. You know that it's not right, but all this stuff is going right for you, and these are decisions that he's making. If you are around that, yes, be careful how you support it.
Yes, and that's exactly what I'm saying. The study at some point should encompass the support systems because that's part of it too, right? I mean, it does start with the person who needs to be able to stop the habit, but the support system is a factor.
Keeps it going.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
Jodi, you mentioned that the people in your family, when they were addicted or whatever, that you didn't talk about it, but you recognized it?
Through putting pieces together as a child over years.
Yeah.
Yes, I put it together. And finally, I will say this. Credit to my parents for one afternoon. I remember finding it weird. We went to McDonald's. We walked inside, ordered food, and sat down at a booth. And it was me, my brother, my mom, and my dad. And I found that unusual because we didn't go to McDonald's to eat very often, and to go walk inside, and they were both acting tense.
Yeah.
And I never even told you this story, Murphy, but they sat us down and said, look, okay, let's eat. But the reason we're sitting you down here, we're about to go to the hospital, and she is in the hospital.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I didn't know she was in the hospital. Someone I loved very much. And, but props to my parents for being honest with us that she has a problem. She's in the hospital again. Her health is failing, but it really all stems from this problem that she has with alcohol and mixing drugs with alcohol, mixing prescription drugs with alcohol. It was a very difficult thing for my father to speak to us. It was a very tense conversation, but it was the first time they ever, and I remember going, oh, she's been in the hospital a lot, and we've never been allowed to go. And, we always think she's hysterical when she's around us, and you guys get tense, and me and my brother are laughing. It's like you put pieces together, but they didn't say she's an alcoholic or she's addicted. They didn't say those words. They just said, we're going to see her in the hospital.
Well, you probably
want you to understand why she's here.
Yeah, they explained it in terms that for that age you would get and understand.
Correct. And that was, look, it was hard for them. I can remember, I was one of those kids. If you have a house full of kids, some of them are in their own world and some of them are paying attention to your every energy and your every move and word. And I was that girl, that kid. And I remember overhearing my parents having a fight, a heated argument once about something that was on TV, some, weeknight movie, and it was about addiction. And my dad got up and turned it off. And mom's like, I was watching that. I don't want to hear about that.
Yeah.
What, are you going to just bury your head? You can't handle it? I mean, and I knew it was about her. I knew the point of, the pain point for him was about that woman in our family that we loved very much. Had a problem.
Again, different generation. I would hope.
Yes.
I'm sure those conversations still happen today on some level, but they're probably less likely to take place today in a world where finally there's acceptance. And so when my dad, before he went into rehab, and my dad was an alcoholic, he drank pretty heavily for about, it was actually about 11 years. It's weird it seemed longer than that because I was a kid. But I mean, he was drinking all day, every day.
Part of your childhood.
Yeah, and by the end, it's one of those where there were glasses hidden all over the place, and all that kind of stuff. And my mother would address it with him, the frustration, but the problem was he was never sober enough to hear that. And it was but my mother was an enabler at one point early on too. You don't know you're the enabler early on, I think. For whatever reason, she was going and she was buying the alcohol.
She was probably also buying everything else, the food for the fridge, too. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But then it was also she was buying it because she didn't want him to drive. And then my grandmother and her would start to have conversations about it. And and eventually became, well, they went beyond intervention. It was one of those where he passed out, and when he wasn't conscious, they dragged him to the rehab center, and he was inpatient for 30 days.
Man.
And he never drank one day out of his life after that. He was sober for 30 years until he passed away. He's lucky he didn't have cirrhosis. His blood alcohol level was 0.45. He should have been dead.
What a story.
They needed to medicate him and all that. But anyway, my point is that the family did talk about it. We were all aware of the problem, and we would all talk to him about it. It just wasn't it wasn't a secret. It just didn't cut through.
You just all lived with it,
right?
And it does affect everyone. And it does seep into everyone. It's not just the person who has the addiction. And there's so much to know about it. There's just so much to know. It's not something you can just be tough and stop doing it. It doesn't work that way. It affects the mind, right? Yeah. But you don't know that when you're younger. You'll hear, well, she needs to just stop it.
Yeah, well, and again, I think that's our generation. I think today there's a big understanding of addiction. That's why opioids are a problem today. You're talking about something. I'm not going to say anything is worse or better than alcohol or whatever, but that's the kind of thing that it doesn't take much, and you're in it, and you're hooked, and your body's going to become addicted to it, and it's
and you get prescribed it. For
a lot of the
certain
synthetic substances are far more addictive than anything previous, and so it's the reason that the conversation has to happen. It's the reason the conversation has to happen when kids are young, and I mean, I think, for example, our daughters, Jodi, are very well aware of that because between schooling and they grew up in a family where they know that my dad was an alcoholic. I stopped drinking almost 14 years ago now, and so they understand, all of those pieces. The study that this fellowship is about, I bet it goes into really deep, spaces, and it needs to go into the very current spaces, which are there's alcohol is still an issue, but it's the opioids, it's the other addictive properties and things like that, and the everything surrounding, that kind of addiction that I'm assuming this medical student is studying.
Well, the reason I wanted to talk about it more beyond 3 things to know today, quickly just telling you, it's such good news because it really does affect everyone. This fellowship that they've created, the Matthew Perry Foundation, because it is in every family. If you think it's not in every family, it's just not unveiled. Yeah. It is in every family. To different degrees, for different reasons. Well, it just is.
And, he was out of the public eye. Matthew Perry was out of the public eye for so long after, Friends. He did a couple of movies, but he hadn't done anything in the years leading up to his death that really gave public attention, other than the Friends reunion, which, if you remember seeing him at that, he wasn't doing so great there either.
He knew
and
there was
there was speculation, of that. And he is very honest in his book. It's the thing about the memoir is you were pulling from. I think you felt like, okay, wow, he's still dealing with it, but he's got this now. But but we had no idea what was going, on behind the scenes again, And so, it's good to be studied. It's a shame that it's still closeted. I think secrecy is always going to be part of the problem, until it's actually, that's why interventions are what they are, right?
And it's human, too. There's probably a lot of families, going back to what you said earlier, the secrecy, it's human to want to keep it on the low, maybe, if it's your family. You don't want
to be embarrassed.
You don't want to be embarrassed, or you don't want someone to think that your father is, one way or the other. I don't think that it was intended to be a secret.
Oh no!
It's
it's
human to do that in families.
Well, in the case of the Matthew Perry thing or anything like that, where there are less than legal things that are going on, of course that's not going to be public. You know what I'm saying? Until there's an investigation, and that's
less than legal things,
right? Exactly. The way that the substances were being acquired and all that sort of stuff, obviously, was not the legal way to do it.
And I don't know if you know this, Jodi, but do you know if they're going to try to expand this to other hospitals around the country?
I hope so. I don't know that yet. It was just announced there at that hospital.
It would be nice to see fellowships set up at a number of hospitals.
Right.
And this certainly could be the model for it. Yeah.
Missed any part of the show? Get it all on the Murphy, Sam, and Jodi podcast.